film is 11408, and it's essentially 2 weeks before the election. I came up with an idea. I was intrigued by sort of the idea that you could capture history, and I was curious what that might look like, not only now, but how it would change when we look at it over time. And so I sent out emails and Facebook messages to everyone I knew, and I encouraged people to film on that day. And so when I initially heard from something like 50 people who told me that they were interested in doing it, and I collected that footage over the next year. I myself filmed in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and then I chose like 26 filmmakers footage, and then I cut it together into a film.
What kind of reactions have you received from people that have watched this movie in regards to what has transpired over the last year and a half in his presidency?
It's been a range of reactions, and which is what I've always wanted. I purposefully constructed the film so that there's no voiceover narration. I don't tell you how to feel about what you're looking at. I purposefully wanted to leave it open to interpretation. People actually cringe when they watch it because they're seeing essentially mirror images of themselves at a previous time, at a different time. And now knowing what they know, that Obama is not a transformational figure, regardless of what you think of what he's done and what he has or hasn't achieved. He's certainly not the transformational figure that some people perhaps naively thought he would be. And so I think that some people watch the film, and to see that enthusiasm captured on screen, it's difficult to watch. So that's one reaction. Some people still feel the same way and watch the movie and live through it nostalgically, and it brings them back to that moment, and it makes them forget all of the negativity of the last 2 years, and it reminds them of the initial spark. So that's another reaction.
Recalling the way you felt on that evening of 11/4/2008, what are your feelings towards the presidency of Obama at this point in time?
I mean, I think there are things to be impressed by and things to be disappointed by. Probably my biggest disappointment is that, if you look at his campaign, there were two big promises that I think were contradictory. One was to be bipartisan, and the other was change. I don't think those two things can ever go together, really. Not at this time. And unfortunately, I think he opted more for bipartisan than change, and I would have liked him to go the other direction.
Do you think that in the remainder of his first term that that's going to tilt over towards not being bipartisan?
I think that it probably has to, but then again, it really all just depends on what happens in the midterms, because if the Republicans are able to take the House or the Senate, they're just going to have to completely rethink everything. I don't even know. I don't know enough about the internal politics of how it works, but
I am so thrilled that you captured that moment, because it is going to go down in history as one of the most wonderful moments in American history. An African American becoming the first president.
And I don't think that should be understated. Whatever you want to say about how his administration has performed or lived up to expectations, to a large degree, that is what made it historic. It's the first black president. It's really hard to overstate that, I think.
How much was left on the floor in the way of video clips that came in, and also individuals that had shared their feelings?
Well, I guess I received somewhere between 50 and 70 hours of footage, and the movie is 70 minutes. So
what was that like for you, having to go through, and you obviously looked at every single foot of film?
Right. It was tedious, but it was also very interesting, and I think it was particularly interesting to watch the footage more than once, because you know, my reaction to it changed depending on how many times I'd seen it, depending on what was going on in the world, depending on what order I saw it in, you know, because I would obviously change. I mean, my initial cut was 5 hours. I dropped in all the footage that I thought was compelling in one way or another. That was 5 hours. And then I slowly whittled away at it by changing the order, and, you know, it was always going to be chronological, roughly, but you don't know exactly when everything's filmed, so.
I know what my favorite individual in the film is.
Mm-hmm.
And what individual really stuck out in your mind?
My favorite is the felon. I'm curious to know yours, but
The felon as well.
yeah.
That was such a pinnacle moment. I mean, when that guy took off his glasses and started looking up, and you could see that the tears wanted to just roll out of his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was.
He's the most compelling person in the movie because, I mean, he's almost like Bogart. He's like a stoic figure who is purportedly telling us that he doesn't care or that it's not going to affect his life, but it's pretty obvious, you know, he's sitting there by himself outside, even though he can't vote because he's a felon, waiting for the results at 7 o'clock. You know, he cares.
What do you think the chances for Obama are in 2012 if he decides to run for a second term?
I think it's way too early to say. It's just
You're
impossible.
going to hold your deck.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he wins because one term is not enough to, you know. We'll be lucky if he just sort of succeeds in putting a stop to what the Bush administration was able to do. Let alone, you know, he needs at least another 4 years before he can actually start moving things in the other direction.
I really look forward to seeing another documentary from you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Yep.
You
Thank
bet,
you.
man.